crazy day, so I do not have a fancy PowerPoint for you today, so we're just going to be talking. I do have kind of an object lesson, and we'll see if we can get to it. But so today, once our other bracket teacher gets here, I'll have them introduce themselves to you, so you guys will kind of know each other's back. While we're waiting for him, we'll just get started. So today we're talking about a factor of classroom management. Okay, Clark likes to call this spinning a lesson. The linguistic term for it is contingency plans. That's what I will call them. But does anyone know? Can anyone define that word for me? What's a contingency plan? Yeah, Hiram?
It's like a plan B when everything goes awry.
Yeah, I like that word, plan B. Hopefully not everything goes awry in your classroom.
Yeah.
But some days it might. Or contingency plans are typically for when you have leftover time. If something does go awry, you might need to pivot more than have a contingency plan. Contingency plans are really more for if you have leftover time. But we're going to talk about those today because it's a big part of classroom management is understanding how long an activity is going to take, what time you need to give an activity. So today we're going to talk about how to avoid even needing contingency plans. Then we're going to talk about some quick and easy contingency plans to just have in your back pocket, have in your backpack, that you can just pull out if you need to. If you are doing formal lesson planning, it's always a good idea. When I'm doing lesson plans, I always jot down, if I think a lesson's going to be a little short, I always jot down an idea for a contingency plan, just so that if I do end up with like 20 minutes of class left, I don't go, crap, what am I going to do? I just have it right on my lesson plan. So, that is always a good backup to have. It's just a contingency plan either written down in your lesson plan or just some in your backpack that you can pull out. So, let's first talk about how to even avoid needing one. So, have you guys had the experience in your classrooms here where you've had leftover time?
Yeah.
Yeah? What have you done?
So the other day in my current events, it wasn't my current events class, it was my workshop class. We're talking about fashion.
Right.
So when we finished all of our activities, we all, critically judged the Oscars fashion.
Nice, very good. Very good. So that's a great contingency plan. Having something topical to pull out. I can't remember why. I think it was the Monday after the Oscars. It came up on a news segment that I watched for my listening speaking class that the Oscars had happened. And someone was like, oh my gosh, did you see what Will Smith did? And then it turned into this like 20-minute magic moment from last time, right? And so I just let it go. Like they were talking about something pop culture, it was kind of on topic for the day, and so I just let it go. So that's the first way to avoid needing a contingency plan. If you have those magic moments where something sparks a student's interest and everyone starts organically communicating, don't kill it. Let that go. I mean, don't let it go for like an hour, right? You don't want to completely derail your lesson. But 10, 15 minutes, that's a great way to artificially extend a lesson or to just have a great organic and natural learning moment. I had another one of those today. We were watching the same news clip or a same company but different news clip, and they were talking about how the US is currently in a space race with China and India. Didn't know that till today. China and India have space programs that are kind of exploding. So it was talking about how the US hadn't been in a space race since the Soviet era. And one of my students was like, what is Soviet? Like, they keep using that word, what does that mean? And I said, oh, that was Russia in the mid to late 1900s. And they were like, what? Why did Russia have a different name? So it ended up, and me as the historian that I am not, give a very, very quick skim over world history of Russia in the Tsar era to the USSR and back to kind of where they are now. So just they could understand A, why the war in Ukraine is such a big deal right now, B, why the space race was such a thing, all that kind of stuff. So that was another sort of magic learning moment where they were asking questions about a topic using vocabulary I had never taught them before. We'd never talked about revolutions or words like Bolshevik or communism or nuclear, right? We'd never talked about those sorts of words, but it was pulling up vocabulary they already knew and it's forcing them to use it in an organic way. So those magic moments can be a great way to extend a lesson. Another way to extend a lesson so that you don't need a contingency plan is to foster more discussion about something you've already been doing. So if your topic is about fashion, and you know it was just New York Fashion Week, or the Oscars just happened or something, pulling up some pictures and having students apply what you've been talking about. If I remember correctly, in the fashion unit, it's very compare and contrast focused, correct? Having them practice those sorts of same structures using real world examples, right? Because often, students will watch those sorts of things, those sorts of events in their native language, so to have the chance to discuss it in the language they're trying to learn can be very helpful for them. In, again, applying those vocabulary words they might not have needed to use otherwise, and those structures that you've been practicing. Okay, anything else that you have done as a contingency plan or to kind of stretch a lesson? Yeah, Kylie?
Like just breakout rooms and having them like teach each other and those things.
That's great, I love doing that. It's kind of a flipped classroom idea. A flipped classroom is where the students are teaching each other or themselves. A true flipped classroom is where students do the learning up front at home and then come and teach in person in class. You are welcome to try and do that. I've not seen it be super effective with large groups of students. But having students teach each other is a really great like quasi-flipped classroom, where you're requiring students to become the experts on something small and then to teach to their peers. So not only are you giving them responsibility, but when you have to teach it to someone else, you learn it a lot better, right? That's a great idea for grammar. If you've talked about a grammar concept, give different groups of students a part of that grammar lesson, have them explain it to the class. It's a great thing to do. Anything else you've done?
I've done loads of things, but another one that I've done before is like, this is something that's really actually not used a lot in education, but I feel like it should be used more, is having students write in a journal or make a journal entry about what they've learned that day.
Okay,
Because it kind of puts what they've learned into words on paper.
that's smart.
And that actually really helps them understand what they've learned, what questions they might have, how they can think out the process.
Okay, so it's like an objectives evaluation application activity. I
Yeah.
like that, that's interesting. I don't know if we've mentioned this to you guys already, but one of our curricular projects right now is going through and adding the SLOs to the top of every instruction page and activity page. So hopefully those SLOs will be right there to remind the students, okay, this activity, we're practicing this goal, right? And then at the end of each lesson, there will be a self-evaluation where students have to say how well they feel like they can do each of the SLOs. So not exactly that in depth of writing it out themselves, but a kind of an activity similar to that will be coming up here soon, which will hopefully be helpful for students. Sorry, my brain's kind of all over today. Okay, here's another thing that you can do to avoid needing a contingency plan. I know that we've talked before about the think, pair, share activity, where you have students think on their own, you ask a question, or you give students a task, you have them think on their own, share with a partner, or pair with a partner rather, and then share with the class. That's a really great way to extend one question into 5, 10, even 15 minutes. Obviously you can have it be way shorter than that if you don't want it to take that much time, but the more students you have, the easier it is to extend it. Why do you guys think that would be helpful? Let's talk about not just ways to extend a lesson, but ways to meaningfully extend a lesson. Why would think, pair, share be helpful for students?
Because instead of just thinking like, what's the answer, they actually need to think about like how they could explain it to someone, and that's usually where you have deeper level understanding.
Yeah, again, if you have to teach it, you have to know it, right? Anything else? Any other reasons think, pair, share can be helpful?
I think it gives them a lot more confidence speaking with a peer
Absolutely.
before speaking with a teacher. Like that's one thing that I've noticed a lot when I do the think, pair, share in my own classroom is oftentimes when I let them work together in pairs, and then at the end when I ask, hey, who would like to share what they're talking about, I often get more volunteers than if I go, all right, who wants to respond in front of the whole class, right? Because they feel more comfortable.
Right. In linguistics, that level of anxiety or that comfortable, we call that their affective filter. The more ways that we can help lower that affective filter, help minimize their anxiety to share in class, the better environment we build for students, right? So think, pair, share is a great way to do that. Not expecting students to answer immediately is another great way. So if I said, what's something you've done when you've needed a contingency plan? Take a second, think about it, then I'll let you know when I'm ready for answers. And then I give you silence, I let you think. That's another way to kind of lower that affective filter. Because it's not talking with a peer, but I am giving you a second to think, right? It's not just right off the top of your head. Okay. Any other ideas why think, pair, share can be helpful?
I think there's a lot of other reasons too, like camaraderie is a huge one. When all the students like each other, it tends to be a better class.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it gets them to know each other a little bit. Like yesterday when you were observing my class, when they're all talking to each other about different things, that gives them a chance to communicate in English in a way that they enjoy learning about their friends and people that they study with.
And that's often the easiest way to speak is with those very familiar common topics, right? Again, lowering that filter, yeah.
Also just, I think it helps them to engage when they're actually need to talk to their partner instead of just being part of the masses,
True, it's much easier to say, oh, someone else will answer it, right? If it's like the entire class. But if it's you and a partner, you're kind of both expected to participate. Another reason I really like Think, Pair, Share, especially in low-level ESL classrooms, is if students don't understand the question, it helps them save a little bit of face instead of having to ask to clarify or to say that I don't know. They can ask a peer, what the heck was this question? And then they understand the point of the activity. That's another good reason. Yeah, Kylie?
I also found with like Think, Pair, Share that students like who aren't paying attention or don't answer you on Zoom, they're like, oh shoot, we're going to breakout room.
Yeah.
I think so they'll actually like participate. And
Right.
It's really good.
Sometimes.
Sometimes,
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move on from Think, Pair, Share, but any other thoughts, ideas? Do you understand how that works? Hopefully you've seen your professors and teachers do that for you in class. I was introduced to it, I was forced to notice it when I was a student learning, and they called it Think, Pair, Share. But after, because it was like a class teaching teachers how to be teachers, so they were giving us the names for what they were having us do. But after I was told that that's what that was, I saw it popping up in lots of different classes. So hopefully that's a skill that if you continue teaching on somewhere else, not ESL, continue to use that. It's a great thing for any kinds of student groups. Okay, let's talk about one other way to avoid contingency plans. One great way to make sure students are understanding and to kind of do like mini extension activities throughout the lesson is to have students do activities in either circuits or stages. So the one that takes the longest, if you're like, I only have 3 activities, I need to stretch. This especially is true in level 6 in the integrated skills class. Have students do something by themselves, then check it in a pair group, and then check all together. That can add 10 to 15 minutes to an activity easily. And again, not everything is about just, padding time, extending time. I'm giving you these times because I know, having done it a lot myself, this is about how much time you can expect to be added to an activity. But the purpose of that, again, it's very similar to Think, Pair, Share. You're letting them think, work through the problems themselves, then they're pairing with someone else and checking their work, and then they're sharing with the entire class. It's just on a larger scale or a longer form. That also allows you, while they are working either by themselves or in pairs, to kind of spot check. Do some informal, not assessments, but kind of making sure that they understand. Evaluations is a better word, to make sure that they understand what's going on. You can pop into breakout rooms, kind of just listen in and see how they're doing. You can walk around and say, hey, you look kind of confused, can I help you? That's a good way to check in on students. All right, couple more thoughts on how to avoid needing a contingency plan. Try to foster discussions on topics or concepts. So for example, this morning, we were reviewing a grammar activity in my class. Now remember, I'm teaching at Slick in the morning, so different curriculum than we have here. We were reviewing a grammar activity where we were talking about count and non-count nouns. And so they were answering questions about different desserts using what they'd learned about count and non-count nouns, specifically much and many. And one of the questions was like, learned this today, that the Belgian airport sells the most chocolate of any place in the entire world. Didn't know that, makes sense. And they were asked, how much chocolate do you think the Belgian airport sells per day? And then they had to answer correctly using count nouns, because pounds are count nouns, so it was in pounds. 2,000 pounds, by the way, in case you're curious, every day.
Ton.
2 tons of chocolate.
2,000 pounds
Of chocolate.
is 1 ton.
Is 1 ton?
Uh-huh.
Well, then 1 ton of chocolate every day. I'm not a math teacher, sorry. Yes,
Well,
a lot.
that's why the Chinese soup is so heavy, 1 ton soup.
1 ton soup, I see.
Got 'em.
So about 800 tons of chocolate a year, or 2,000 pounds of chocolate a day. And so they were like, first of
That's a
all,
ton.
isn't it a lot?
Oh my God.
Students were having a hard time wrapping their heads around what a pound was, because that's not a measurement they're super familiar
Yeah.
with. So that led to a discussion of kind of like why we use the imperial system and not the metric system, and then the conversion between kilograms and pounds, and that was still being kind of hard to understand. So we looked at some examples of what a pound is and gave them an example of like, well, newborn babies, like 7 pounds. It kind of gives you an idea of how much that weighs, and lots of vocabulary added in that activity. And then someone was like, why do people buy that much chocolate? I don't even like chocolate.
Ooh.
So then we got into this whole discussion about like, why do people like chocolate? Why would the airport be the place that sells the most chocolate?
Hmm.
And then we got to talk a little bit about, well, in the US, this is why there are restaurants and places you can buy food in airports, because it's past airport security, you can take it with you on the plane, all that kind of stuff. So it was a cultural teaching moment, a vocabulary teaching moment, and an extension, and we were practicing counting, not count nouns. So even just asking like questions that are loosely connected to the question or the activity that you're doing can spark a lot of extra discussion and add lots of knowledge you may not have been planning on instructing on, but that would be good and effective for your students. The class that I teach in the morning is full of moms, and so now that they understand, you know, it's 2.2 pounds per kilogram, they're like, oh, recipes make sense now, or like, this is what a cup is, oh, okay. So that just giving them, you know, I'm not intending to give them life skills today, but it did. So those sorts of teaching moments, again, it's kind of a magic moment. Those can happen if you just ask additional questions, don't just bulldoze through correcting things.
Well, and one thing I think a lot of times we get caught up in is we have all these activities that we have to get through, you know, and the mentality becomes, gotta get through these activities, because that's the most important thing, is getting through these activities, but that's secondary. The objectives are primary, but you can meet the objectives sometimes without even looking at or getting into a particular set of activities if you planned ahead and planned it correctly. And
Or prepared to take those opportunities when they pop up.
yeah. And another thing that I wanted to mention about planning, but also about whether it's Think, Pair, Share or any of the other activities, almost every time Ashley was saying something is, well, the students are talking about this, the students are talking about that. Well, the optimal or the best learning environments are where the students do 70% of the talking.
I was gonna say the 70-30 rule.
Yeah, and a lot of times I don't see that happening.
It's hard.
It is. I
It's
mean,
hard.
I'm not even sure I can do that, but
Well,
that's the optimal thing. But the more that we have our students involved in figuring things out and talking about things and solving problems, and certainly, I think Pair Share is in a way sometimes a problem-solving activity because they have something that they gotta discuss. Well, first they gotta think about it themselves and then solve the problem. How am I gonna talk with my fellow student about this, and what are we gonna, how do we share these ideas? And then getting it out to the entire class is always good for students.
And students end up teaching each other that way too. In Think, Pair, Share, like I remember when when I was in my undergraduate, we would do a lot of think, pair, shares and the, I'm having a really vivid memory, in the teaching, listening, and speaking class at BYU, which is where I did my undergrad. And we would think, okay, we've come up with every possible way to do this. We're ready to share our answers with this professor. And we would, each group had like 5 minutes to talk and share all of their thoughts, and we thought we'd exhausted the topic. And then the next group had completely different 5 minutes of stuff. And then the next group, something else completely different. So it ended up that we ended up with like 4 times as much material for one problem than we could think of. So students end up teaching each other anyway, in Think, Fair, Shares, which is lovely. If you're not familiar with the 70-30 rule, basically I learned about it in linguistics, I assume it applies to all teaching, or it should be applied to all teaching. The rule is that students should be talking 70% of the time in class and teachers 30% of the time. That is a really hard standard to hold yourself to. So if you feel like I'm just talking all day, try and keep that 70-30 in mind and pull back from talking and have the students talk. An easy way to do that is if a student asks you a question like, what is a count noun? Flip it back on the class. Say, what is a count noun? And see if anyone can answer, and then that's forcing the students to talk to each other. And it's, again, helping them problem solve and learn. Okay, the last thing I have is a suggestion for how to kind of do mini extension activities or to stretch a lesson, is to do illustrative videos. So, like Jane did with watching, pictures of people walking down the red carpet at the Grammys. That's an illustrative video. As long as you're doing something academic with it, that's a great teaching tool. If you're just like, here, watch whatever SpongeBob, that's probably not pedagogically very sound, but if you're using it as a tool or as a framework for some sort of actually measurable practice, then that's a good tool. Some great creators that do videos that I have found are good for almost any topic. TED Ed, always check them. They have really good, very simple explanations. They always have, delightful little animations that are nice to watch. And they're built for, I think, around a 10th grade level. So it's pretty accessible for lots of different levels. And they're fair use for education on YouTube. So that's a great one to watch. I am also a fan of Pixar videos, which is a good segue into what to actually do if you need a contingency plan. Before we move on to that, anyone have questions about what to do to avoid needing a contingency plan? Yeah, Michelle.
I guess it's kind of specific, but my integrated skills class right now, we're talking about like pretty heavy topics, like world hunger. Today we're doing gang violence.
Yeah.
It's kind of been a common theme in this class.
Yeah, that unit's rough.
It's hard to know, like, I don't know. I don't want to like force them to like talk about it too much, and I don't know. Like, I don't know if there's like a way to like make it more light, or especially like if I need to like use more time.
Right. Well, this is what I always do with those potentially emotionally triggering or controversial topics. I can just tell you what I do, and then we can open it up to everyone to see if people have other ideas. With things like gang violence or like, I think you have level 5 for integrated. Yeah, you're gonna have a unit about US government, so like abortion and gun laws, those are gonna pop up. On potentially inflammatory or controversial issues, I always start right at the top of class going, okay, this is what we're talking about today. I understand that this can be a very divisive issue where people have very strong opinions on both sides. This classroom is a safe space for everybody. So we all need to think about being respectful and letting other people talk and hearing everybody's opinion even if you don't agree. And then you start with class. And that often puts them in a frame of mind to go, okay, my opinion is valid, but so is yours, even if it's different. So for things like gang violence, that's not necessarily helpful if it's like emotionally triggering for students, but if they feel like shame or someone from a different country is going to come after their country because they have bad gang violence in their country, that kind of shuts that down at the very beginning. As far as how to handle heavy topics, what do you guys think? How do you make that more approachable for students? Yeah.
I think this is kind of a new age thing, but this is what I put into practice. I give a trigger warning. Pretty much blanketly across whenever we talk about something.
That's probably wise, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, the other day when the Brooklyn subway shootings happened, we talked about that in my current events class.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, I said, we're talking about public shootings today, we're talking about massacres, we're talking about school shootings. And I said, if you have a really hard time with this, it's okay if you can't be here. But this is what we're going to be talking about today. Please let me know if you're uncomfortable and if you need to talk, I'm here.
I think that's wise too. Like, let your students know that you know they're human and that you're human. Some days I teach the level 7 classes at night, and some days they just come in and they are so stressed and they're so full of anxiety, and talking about resumes or how to write an essay for the GRE is just like the last thing that they need that day. And so just like sitting down and kind of having like a collective boohoo session sometimes, like not every day is that fine, but for like 10 minutes, that's okay. It lets them know that you see them and you hear them and you know that they're people. And if you do have a student that's having a particularly difficult day, I mean, you can tell me what your opinion is, Ken, but I'm more than happy to let a student go. If it's just triggering and absolutely they're just not gonna be effective for their learning and they're just going to create potential other problems for the rest of the class, I'm happy to let them go and come up with an alternative assignment for them that isn't quite as triggering. What's your opinion on that, Ken?
No, I agree. We have no way of reading the mind of another student, but if a student, especially someone who has actually experienced either being in the crossfire or having witnessed something gang-related or having fled from a country that's gang-related, fled from because their lives were actually threatened and they had to leave or they might not be here anymore. We can't just, well, this is what you gotta learn, and this is why we're doing this. All of that is gonna go right over their heads because they're not gonna hear. And it's not gonna, cognitively, they will shut down because they have all this other stuff in the background, all the noise in the background, and it's better, so.
And if you just feel like for everybody it's gonna be like that, come talk to me. We'll talk about an alternative lesson because I'm happy to help you do that. It's like Ken said, it's not about pushing content, it's about making sure our students are learning and that they're comfortable. And for a lot of students, like medical stuff right now with all the COVID pandemic, that's potentially triggering for a lot of students now. So, I mean, there's lots of things. If you feel like it could at all be a problem, come talk to me. We'll talk about solutions.
Okay.
I think one more thought I had, and then I'm happy to move on from this. I think it's also important to show them that it's okay to be sad and embarrassed about something. And in my upper level classes, we end up talking about civil rights a lot because it affects the government, or there's famous speeches or whatever that we're studying. And I always preface it with, I feel a weird amount of guilt about this. I was not alive, it's not my fault, it wasn't my family's fault, but it was a part of my country, and as a part of my country, I feel guilty about this. And that's okay. It's important to talk about stuff and to learn from it, because if we don't talk about it, then we're just doomed to repeat it, right? And that can help them open up about stuff. Like if they have emotional trauma themselves from going through an experience, that's not gonna help. But if they're feeling shame about, yeah, I'm from Colombia, we have a lot of drugs that come from my country, that can help them open up about those sorts of discussions of letting them know, I'm also not super proud of every single part of my country's history.
Right.
But that's okay, we still gotta talk about it anyway. Because if we swept it under the rug, we're not learning.
Right.
Yeah, I think the gang violence one, even though we have students from other countries who have escaped the gang violence, this particular lesson centers on
It's on
Washington,
UC, I
DC.
believe, yeah.
And it can be kept in that context. And there are people who are interviewed who are either, they feel that a gang member is an absolute criminal and should be, put away, or the other side of things is a lot of them are really young people and they have nowhere else to go. There's nothing for them, and looking at the human side of things, both sides, and hearing both opinions and, keeping it as, non-accusatory as possible within the classroom. Today this morning I observed the 5 class, and it went very well. Because I think the teacher was approaching it from a very positive, I mean, it's gang violence, but, you know, not trying to be, you know, just a downer.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And I think, if I remember correctly, those lessons focus on, at some point in the block, they focus on how can we fix these problems?
Definitely, yeah.
So focusing like a large portion of your lesson on that, like the, okay, here's the problem, how do we fix it? Put it in more of a positive light. One more thought and then we'll move on. Sometimes these lessons are triggering to teachers. I had a teacher last semester who death is very triggering to him. It gives him anxiety, it makes him sick on the spot to have to talk about it. And so they were, I think it was also level 5, or level 5, integrated skills, it's got some problems. They were talking about like doctor-assisted suicide and like NDR, or do not resuscitate orders, that kind of stuff, like what happens to you after you've died legally, organ donation, all that kind of stuff. And he just couldn't. He was like, I tried, I prepped, I just can't. And so he called me in a panic, and I said, you know what, I got you. I'll come teach your lesson, it's okay. It's not hard for me, I'll come teach it. So don't be afraid to ask for help. If it's hard for you too, we're here to help everybody as people. We're all people first, right? Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. If you teach level 1, now you're like, well, I'm talking about Mary Had a Little Lamb, so that's great. Okay. So let's transition over to some really quick and easy contingency plans to have in your back pocket, have in your backpack to just pull out. My favorite of these are Pixar shorts. I talk about this a lot, but I never really model what to do with it, so we are going to do that today. I'm going to model for you what I would do. First of all, students love these because it's like an activity and it's a video. Who doesn't like watching videos in class? Second of all, there is no talking in these videos. So even for low-level students, they don't have a hard time accessing this information because there's no talking. So because there's no talking, it allows you to use it for a variety of different purposes. My favorite Pixar shorts are Presto. That one's usable for lots of different stuff. One-man band, which I'm going to show you today. Lifted is one of my favorite. And Jerry's Game. Those are the ones I typically use. Jerry's Game is very good for count and non-count nouns because there's lots of little pieces. He's playing chess in a park, so there's lots of little pieces of things to use count and non-count nouns for. Lifted, Presto, and One-Man Band are all very good for inferences and predictions, as well as, you know, using any variety of sentence structures, present progressive, past perfect, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do an inference practice today, or a prediction practice on One-Man Band. So I'm going to treat you guys like a class, and I'm going to show you exactly how I would do this, okay? Okay, so today we've been talking about how to make predictions in reading, and we did some practice with that in our class, but now we're going to practice with a video, because we all love videos. So this is a video called One-Man Band. If you don't know what that is, it's one man, or one guy, that has instruments put all over his body, and they're connected by straps and ropes so that when he kicks his leg, it makes a drum go, or he can hit drums with his hands and play a trumpet at the same time. And he is doing kind of a battle of the one-man bands with another guy. And so we're gonna watch this video. I'm going to stop it at different times and ask you to predict what's going to happen next, okay? Ooh, that's probably playing loud. Hold up. No, I own this one. If I own it, it needs to be more than 480p. if I was doing inference practice, I would stop here and I'd say, what's this? And people would say, it's a cup. And I'd say, okay, why is it there?
Because they want to put money in it.
Because he wants people to put money in it. How do you know that? It didn't say that's what it's for. How did you know?
Life experience.
Have you seen this in your country?
Yes.
Do you know what the word for this is? There's a verb for this in English. Did you know?
Cup handling.
Close. Panhandling is when you're begging for money, but when you're performing for money, the word we use in English for that is busking. At least I believe it's busking.
I have no idea. I've never heard that word.
It's
We're
illegal
teaching
in
us
Utah.
English here.
I'm pretty sure. So I think in the Utah legislature, it's illegal to busk.
It is?
Yeah,
How do you spell that? With a Q-U-E?
yeah.
B-U-S-Q?
Q-U-S-E.
I busked for like 3 years. Down in downtown Provo when I
Yeah,
was in high
it's
school.
something about traffic safety, but, okay. So if I was doing inference practice, I would pause it at different times, and being familiar with the video is very helpful in knowing when to pause it. But I would pause it at different times that would force them to access background knowledge, if that was inferences, but we're doing predictions, okay? So let's keep going for predictions. Okay, what is the little girl going to do?
Put the coin in the wishing well.
In the water, okay? Any other guesses? What is she going to do? Fall in the water? Oh, I hope not. What else?
Oh, I hope she does.
In the cup? Okay, let's see. Cool. Okay, again, if it was inferences, I'd stop and say, what does this mean? And it goes like this. Okay.
Oh, no.
I told you it was a battle of the one-man bands. Okay, what do you think the little girl's gonna do?
Go listen to the other guy.
The other guy? Why is she gonna go listen to the other guy?
It's different.
It's different?
Mhm.
Are his clothes nicer?
Maybe.
Pay attention. See, he's kind of like dirty, a little bit dusty. Look at the other guy. See if he looks like he's like has a little more money. Let's look. Oh, his clothes are shiny.
It's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay, again, for inferences, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Okay, what's gonna happen next?
Gonna fight
We're gonna fight with their fists?
with their music.
With their music. Oh,
It's like a dance battle from Puss in Boots.
it is a bit. Why are they fighting?
They want the coin.
How many coins are there?
One.
Just one. How many people are there?
2.
Uh-oh, that's a problem. Okay, let's see what happens.
Oh.
Oh, he has a stage. This guy's cool.
She can't decide.
Let's wait and see.
That's what's gonna happen.
Okay, the little girl's going like this. What's gonna happen?
Drops the coin.
She drops the coin, right? But what is the little girl going to do?
Run away.
Run away, maybe? Maybe cry? Looked like it was a little loud for her, kind of startling, maybe. Okay, what do you think the two men are gonna do if the coin's on the ground?
Probably
Maybe they
go
will
after
fight with their fists to try and get it. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh. Well,
Oh, that was a long way down.
okay, what's the little girl gonna do?
Cry.
Gonna cry? She's gonna be sad?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, again, inferences, what does this mean?
Give me my money back.
What does this mean when they're patting their pockets? Those are inference questions. Okay, what's the little girl gonna do?
She's going to attempt.
She's going to attempt to do what?
To get her coin.
To get money, to bust. Good use of the vocab, good. To get money herself. Okay, let's see. That's a fat bottom lip. Okay, what's she gonna do?
Throw him in the well.
Throw him in the well, okay. What do you think? Is she gonna be nice? Is she gonna need to give one to each man?
No, children are bitter and brutal.
Maybe she'll give both to the one she thinks was better?
No.
Let's see. Okay, again, inferences, what does this mean? Okay, and so there is a little smidge of this video that kind of explains like what happens next. At the end of these credits, if you hadn't watched the video, you wouldn't know it was there. So again, be familiar with these videos, you're gonna use them. Okay, so I'd say, okay, watch. Okay, so, did that video go like you expected? No, it kind of twists and turns, right? Then we talk about how predictions aren't always accurate, and that's okay. It's just a skill that we use in reading to help us, you know, be ready to read or to access, to comprehend whatever. Okay, does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I really like this one, obviously, for inferences, because I'm forcing them to access knowledge they already have about body language, about situational knowledge, and that 5-minute video, not even 4.5-minute video, that took us 10 minutes. And you could stretch it longer if you had each person tell you what they thought was going on. I've used this video with sentences before. These are great for grammar. If you're doing the present perfect progressive, you could say, okay, this is what's happening. Tell me a sentence with what's happening in present perfect progressive. And then on your iPad, you can write it down on the video so everyone has a visual representation. You can have her write it down on paper, check it with a partner. There's lots of things you can do with this. Okay? Any questions about these? These are my favorite. This is my go-to immediate, like I have to have one contingency plan. Another one that's really good if you're in a reading class are fluency drills. There are different kinds of fluency drills. There are sentence level fluency drills and then word level fluency drills. Sentence level, you take like one paragraph, you don't do a whole reading, it's just one paragraph. And you have students in a group, however many, and you say each one of you reads one sentence and you go around in a circle. So you have to pay attention because you're racing this other group, and if you're not paying attention, you're gonna fall behind. And it takes them a couple of tries to get into the rhythm of that one sentence apiece. And you say, okay, good. Now let's make it even harder. You each read one word. You really have to be paying attention. And that's forcing them to attend to each word individually. Another way to do word level fluency drills is have them start at the end of a paragraph. They do this individually, they don't do this in a group, and read backwards. So their brains aren't accessing the meaning, but they're focusing on each word individually. That can help with like sight word practice or pronunciation practice. There's lots of things fluency drills can help with. So that's a great reading class one. For just ideas in general, for our students, telling them if this is integrated skills, telling them to work on their final project, or helping them work on their final project is always helpful, because I guarantee you they're not doing it early. So they'll have things to work on. In general, talking about US culture can be great, especially if we've got like a holiday coming up or we just had a holiday, talking about like the cultural importance, kind of how it started. Like Easter is kind of a weird holiday for a lot of students to understand because it's got this weird like religious commercial duality to it, where it's like it's very religious, sort of very like religiously intense meaning, and then like the Easter bunny and peeps and chocolate, and so it's really hard for students to like navigate that because it's a weird cultural thing. So talking through stuff like that's helpful. There's lots of YouTube videos about like the origin of holidays. History does a lot of good ones that are like 5 minutes long that explain it pretty simply.
For those lower levels though, sometimes those history videos can be a little bit too
They can be a little
advanced.
2 minutes, yeah. So I mean, take it, adapt it to the level that you have. I always find that it's helpful to, I mean, this is kind of brave, but I love doing it because students always surprise me. If we have extra time, I'll open it up, I'll say, okay, ask me any question you want, it has to be in English. I've gotten some weird questions, I've gotten some really benign questions, but it always leads to discussion. So, I mean, that is, if you are comfortable with answering whatever questions they might ask. Typically they'll ask things like, where are you from? What's your family like? Are you married? Do you have children? That kind of stuff.
So when I do that, one of the things I do is, they can go around the room,
Mhm.
the first people always ask the easy question.
Right, then
Like-
they can't repeat questions.
And it's like if they ask a yes, no question, they only get a yes or no, they don't get any further information,
Mm,
you know? So, are you married? Yes.
that's a way more
Next.
structured way to have them learn, okay?
Yeah. And they get real quick that if they want more information, they gotta ask information questions and not yes, no questions. But usually, and I tell them at the beginning, if we start here, we're going around, these folks here, they're gonna ask all the simple questions, so you need to already be thinking about the more complicated questions that you can ask.
Sometimes they ask weird ones, like,
Mhm.
I got one like, what's the craziest meat you've ever eaten? And I was like, dredged up a random memory from like 6th grade. There was some kid whose brother served an LDS mission in Australia, and he brought home kangaroo jerky.
Ooh.
You.
And then that kid brought it to a 6th grade class, and we all tried it. So that rings as the weirdest meat I've ever tried. So I've always got that there. But yeah, sometimes it's really benign, like, do you have any pets? And then if you do, like, pull up pictures, show pictures of your family if you're comfortable. That creates those sorts of I'm human, you're human moments that helps build rapport with students. That's always helpful.
I don't know.
Kangaroo jerky, I bet everybody was just jumping at the chance to get one.
It was terrible.
Oh.
So gamey.
my.
It's like venison on steroids. Yeah.
Whenever I do this question thing though, I always get questions about math. And I can never avoid it. It's like a painful.
I've never had that happen to me.
Oh my gosh, I got like a student asking me questions about how to find the circumference and area of a circle the other day. And I was like, I can tell you, but this is such a
No, I would shut that down and be like, I'm an English teacher, not a math teacher, sorry.
Lots of math questions.
And if they get too personal with a question, I tell them up front, if you ask me, you can ask me any question, but if it's too personal, I'm gonna tell you it's none of your business.
Yeah, you can set
So,
boundaries for it, yeah.
Mhm.
Just, I mean, if you don't set boundaries, just be aware that they will ask you about anything. The last thing, and then I'll let you go, it's always, if you have a good group of students that you know, like if you give them time to work on homework, I always appreciate that as a student to have time in class to work on homework. So if you have a group that you know they'll work on it, give them time to work on it. There's a limit to that. Don't give them like a half an hour, give them like 10 minutes, but if you have a class where you know it's like pulling teeth to get participation, don't just turn them loose because they are going to be on Facebook or something. Do something more structured like this. Okay? Does that kind of help?
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about what a contingency plan is, how to avoid needing them, some sort of ideas for extension activities throughout the class to stretch it, and then some quick and easy go-tos to have in your back pocket. Okay? Any questions I can answer right this second? Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Like I said, if you ever have questions about a lesson or concerns, come talk to me, we'll work through it, okay? Thanks guys, have a good night. Sorry Hiram, you never got to introduce yourself. You can do that now if you
Hiram.
want.
I guess the other guy never came
He
in.
never came, no.
Oh, Jeff?
Yeah,
Yeah,
What if he, what happened?
I don't know. I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be teaching the other, cause I heard we're splitting level 6 into 2 next summer.
So it's more, I don't know what
Are we?
everyone else
Or
is
this
teaching.
one?
Yeah.
Who decided that?
I don't know, I heard that though.
They
Where
didn't
did
talk
you hear
to
it
me.
from?
I heard it from
An unreliable source.
Apparently.
unreliable source.
If Ken and I don't know about it, it's probably not happening.
Oh, okay.
I'd love to know who said that though, cause we need words. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that Ken and I would choose. I mean, if they all come in person, we're gonna have to. There's like 30 of them, so we have to.
Oh, I
Well, that was
see,
my concern because okay.
I see what, I see, okay. Yeah, if a class gets too large, it'll get split, but.
Yeah,
Because my level 6 grammar class is so long, it takes me legitimately probably like 5.5 hours on Friday to grade all of their grammar exams. So by the time I get done with Friday, I'm just like, I'm dead for 2 days. Like, I can't do anything. So. I was
yeah,
like-
once we have more classrooms, we are totally open to splitting, we just don't right now.
Yeah.
We're kind of full at night, so. We'll have to make it to it. Thank you.
No worries.